Thanks for joining us on how to become a better knitter. I'm Camilla, the owner of A Twist of Yarn. Today we're going to demystify the gauge swatch, one of the foundation principles of knitting. Now I've got 3 gauge swatches here. One is 100% Peruvian wool, one is a wool and alpaca blend, and the other one is a superwash merino. All 3 will actually work very differently, and we're going to come to that. There are 5 stages of swatching in order to get the desired results that you're wanting. The first one is choosing the right needles. So in all of these swatches, I've done exactly the same thing. So I've started with a 4.5mm needle, and then I've gone to a 5mm needle. Because these are worsted weight yarns, typical needles are a 4.5 or a 5. Gauge is typically in between 18 and 20 stitches in 4 inches. Now, when we look at a pattern, it will tell us what the gauge should be. The next one is we need to be able to calculate the number of stitches that we need to cast on. A lot of patterns will tell you 22 stitches in a 4-inch gauge. We don't just want to cast on the number of stitches that the gauge is saying. We need to have more stitches because what happens, as you can see in these gauge swatches, is curling, and that's just the nature of what's going to happen with your swatch. These are not blocked yet, which we will get to a little bit later. In order to calculate that 4-inch gauge swatch, we need to have that 4-inch measurement here. These stitches don't count because we'll end up rolling and affecting the gauge. So we usually want to cast on approximately 10 more stitches. So if the gauge swatch says 22 stitches in 4 inches, cast on 30 stitches. If it says 18 stitches, again, cast on approximately 30 stitches. Then you're going to knit your first couple of stitches and your last couple of stitches in order to create a border. That way we can measure the true measurement of how many stitches per inch are in each of the sizes. Next, we're going to get into washing. So here is our tub of cold water that I'm going to put my swatches in. I'm just going to put another little squirt of a wool wash. This one is Eucalan. It just has a little bit of lanolin just to be able to condition the wool a little bit, but it's fully washable out. Now, I'm just going to place all of my swatches in this bucket. Now, under most conditions, I would not necessarily put all 3 colors in one because if one happens to bleed, we don't want it to bleed onto another, but we'll see what happens. Now, I'm just going to let these soak usually about half an hour because wool is hygroscopic, which means it wants to shed water. So the first thing it's going to want to do is not want to allow that water to be absorbed, which is why we need to leave it in for a little bit longer than what you would normally think you would want to. Right, so we're going to take our first swatch. I'm just going to kind of out flat. I'm not really going to stretch it at all. I'm just going to let it rest. So there's number 1. Here's our second one, which is just the 100% wool. I'm not going to pin it or do anything too drastic. That's something we will talk about when, where, how in another video. And our superwash has a tendency to be very stretchy and wimpy because of the treatment that the wool has had. So depending on your project type, superwash yarn is meant to go into the dryer. So in order to get a true gauge for this particular swatch, I'm actually going to throw it in the dryer to have it as the best comparison to the other 2 gauge swatches. We are back with our nicely swatched wools. We're going to take a few minutes just to sort of swatch now that it has come the washing process and the drying process. Because what happens is now the yarn sort of settles into where it wants to be. Any tension that's in it has now come out. So what we're going to do first is we're going to take 2 inches. So I'm going to align this under a little V, and we're going to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So now we can just double it. So this one gives us 9 plus 9 is 18 stitches in our 4 inches. We could count all the way across, but the 2 inches is a good mark. If we're counting and say it comes to 4 1/4 or 4 1/2 or anything that's a 1/2 1/4 mark, then maybe go over the 2 inches or 3 inches, or then if worse comes to worse, you can do the whole 4 inches just to make sure to get a like even number. Otherwise, over an inch, 2 inches is sufficient. So this side we've got 9, so that's 18 stitches in our 4 inches. Now this is the one where we did the 5 millimeter. So I'm going to give this a count. So 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm getting 4 1/2. So 4 1/2 and 4 1/2 is 9, which gives me 18 stitches as well. I'm just going to give that another little count. Let's move it over here because this is 5, and usually I end up getting a little bit. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, it's not 1/4. So let's count all the way across. It's kind of 3/4. So I'm going to count across the 4. 18, 17, yeah, 18, what it's coming out to be. Before this swatch was washed, I was getting 17 stitches in my 4 inches. So just by washing this wool alpaca, I gained 1 stitch in my 4 inches. Now 1 stitch in 4 inches at this particular gauge, say if your garment had a circumference of 40 inches, would make a 2-inch difference in your garment. Here we have our 100% wool swatch. So it'll be interesting to see how this became loftier as after it's been washed. So we have 9 stitches, so 18 stitches. So the 4.5 actually remained the same as the original swatch before it was washed. I'm going to say 8 1/2, so 17. So I had 18 stitches before, so the 5 millimeter actually relaxed a little bit, knowing once again that 1 stitch over a certain circumference could make a difference of up to 2 inches. And last but not least, this is our superwash, which I did put in the dryer. Now this gauge before it was washed was 19 stitches, 10. So this actually has shrunk a little bit. So now I'm at 20 stitches per 4 inches, which is usually pretty good for a worsted gauge. 9 1/2. So now we're at about 9, which was similar to what I had pre-swatch, but this one definitely changes. So with all of these, you want to be able to which fabric you like the best. Again, 1 stitch can change the size of your garment, but just again, which do you like the best? And if you're not satisfied, just try another needle, just get it in to create that fabric that you want. Now, one little knitting hack, you may notice that I have some little extra stitches in here. As you're doing your gauge swatch, these are little notes to myself of the needle size. So that way you don't have to put a little tag or a note or remember where you're putting it. This way it's right in the swatch. I can look at the swatch and know immediately, oh, I've got 4 purl bumps and I've got 5 purl bumps. So I used a 4.5. Here I've got 5 purl bumps. So I know I used a 5 millimeter needle. The less you have to think sometimes, the better, and you can focus on the things that are important. I hope you found that helpful. If you have any questions, please message me or give us a shout. Thanks for watching.